In 1785, a 16-year-old boy was mocked at military school for his accent and poor French. His classmates called him Straw Nose and laughed at the way he spoke. He ate alone, studied alone, and spent his nights reading military books while others partied. By age 35, this same boy would rule most of Europe. His name, Napoleon Bonaparte. This wasn't luck. This wasn't just ambition. This was a code, Napoleon's code of excellence. And today we're going to break it down. Think about this. When Napoleon first arrived at the Royal Military School of Brienne, he couldn't even properly pronounce his own name in French. He spoke with a thick Corsican accent that made him stand out like a sore thumb. His fellow students, mostly from wealthy French families, saw him as a poor island boy who didn't belong. But while they mocked him, Napoleon was doing something different. He was turning their rejection into fuel. During those early years, Napoleon wrote something fascinating in his private journal. He scribbled, "Life is a burden for me, because I enjoy no pleasure and everything is a cause of pain." But right below this dark thought, he added, "I will achieve what others find impossible." This wasn't just teenage drama. This was the beginning of his code of excellence. Here's what's crazy. Most people think Napoleon's rise to power started with his military victories. But they're wrong. It started in that military school library. While other students spent their free time fencing and socializing, Napoleon devoured books on military strategy. He didn't just read them, he obsessed over them. He memorized battle formations from ancient Rome. He could recite troop movements from wars fought centuries ago. By the time he graduated, he had read every single military book in the school's library, some of them 3 or 4 times. But here's the part most history books miss. Napoleon wasn't just studying war. He was studying excellence itself. In his personal notes, he broke down why great leaders succeeded and why they failed. He analyzed everything from how they spoke to their troops to how they planned their meals. When other cadets saw him as the weird loner who studied too much, he was actually building the foundation that would help him conquer Europe. Think about this. The same boy who was laughed at for his accent would later give speeches that made hardened soldiers cry with loyalty. The same poor student who couldn't afford new boots would eventually wear a crown. This wasn't just a random success story. This was the result of a specific code, a set of principles so powerful that they turned an outsider into an emperor. And the best part? These aren't just historical facts. This code works just as well today as it did 200 years ago. In your own life right now, you're probably facing your own version of Napoleon's military school. Maybe people underestimate you. Maybe they mock your accent, your background, or your dreams. But here's what Napoleon understood. Being exceptional isn't about natural talent. It's not about luck. It's about following a specific code that turns underdogs into emperors. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly how this code works. The world remembers winners. But here's what most people miss about Napoleon's rise. It wasn't just his military genius that set him apart. It was his obsession with excellence in everything. Let me show you something fascinating. In 1795, when Napoleon was just a minor officer, he wrote in his diary, "I lived like a bear, always alone in my small room with my books, my only friends." But in that same entry, he explained why. "A chance will come, and when it does, I must be the most prepared man in France." This wasn't just empty talk. Napoleon had a unique method of preparation that would seem insane to most people. Every night he would test himself. He would pick a random military scenario, like defending a city with limited supplies or attacking an army twice his size, and give himself just 30 minutes to create a complete battle plan. Then he would critique his own plan mercilessly, finding every possible flaw. Here's what's really interesting. Napoleon kept detailed records of these practice sessions. In one note, he wrote, "In war, as in life, no detail is too small to ignore." He would calculate everything. How many calories each soldier needed, how many shoes would wear out in a month, even how weather changes would affect gunpowder performance. When other officers were drinking wine and playing cards, Napoleon was calculating supply routes and memorizing terrain maps. But this obsession with excellence came at a price. Napoleon's fellow officers called him a math-obsessed hermit. They joked that he loved numbers more than people, yet these same officers would later serve under him. amazed at how he could make split-second decisions in the heat of battle. Why? Because while they were mocking him, he was banking thousands of hours of mental preparation. Think about this. When Napoleon faced his first major battle as commander, his army was outnumbered and low on supplies. Most generals would have retreated. But Napoleon didn't just see the battle. He saw every calculation, every scenario he had practiced in his room. He knew exactly what to do, because he had already fought this battle 100 times in his mind. The stakes couldn't be higher in today's world. We live in an age where being good enough means being replaceable. When Napoleon said, "Impossible is a word found only in the dictionary of fools," he wasn't just making a cute quote for Instagram. He was describing a mindset that turned him from a poor island boy into the master of Europe. And here's the thing. This same mindset can turn you from whatever you are now into whatever you dream of becoming. But, and this is crucial, you need to understand that excellence isn't a goal. It's not something you achieve and then relax. For Napoleon, excellence was like breathing, something you do every single moment, whether anyone is watching or not. In your field right now, there are people treating excellence like a part-time job. They work hard when the boss is watching. They push themselves when there's a deadline. But true excellence, Napoleon's kind of excellence, doesn't work that way. And this brings us to the first principle of Napoleon's code. A principle so powerful that it alone could change your entire life. The obsession with details. This is where Napoleon's true genius started. Most people know Napoleon as the general who conquered Europe, but few know about his almost bizarre attention to detail. Here's something mind-blowing. Napoleon could recite from memory the exact number of cannons in every fortress in France. Not just rough numbers, exact numbers, down to the last musket ball. But it went even deeper than that. In 1796, before his Italian campaign, Napoleon spent 3 months memorizing every road, every bridge, and every mountain pass in northern Italy. He would walk around his room at night, muttering distances between cities and the height of mountain peaks. His servants thought he was going mad. But when he finally invaded Italy, he moved his army through mountain passes that other generals didn't even know existed. Let me share something that shows just how deep this obsession went. One night, during a routine inspection, Napoleon stopped at a random soldier's tent. He pointed at the soldier's boots and said, "Those boots were issued exactly 43 days ago. You should request new ones tomorrow." The soldier was shocked. Napoleon was right down to the exact day. Why did he know this? Because he had memorized the wear rate of army boots in different terrains. This wasn't just showing off. Napoleon once wrote, "A general who knows small things will win battles. A general who knows only big things will lose wars." He proved this in battle after battle. At Austerlitz, often called his greatest victory, Napoleon won partly because he knew exactly how long it took for morning fog to clear in that region during winter. He timed his attack to the minute, using the fog as a weapon. Here's where it gets interesting for you. In today's world, this same principle is what separates the truly exceptional from the merely good. Take someone like Elon Musk. In early SpaceX days, he could recite the exact cost and specifications of every rocket component. His engineers were stunned that a CEO could know such technical details. But this wasn't just showing off. This detailed knowledge let him make quick, accurate decisions that saved his company millions. Think about your field. Most people know the basics. They know what everyone knows. But Napoleon's first principle teaches us that mastery lives in the details others ignore. If you're in sales, do you know the exact time of day when your clients are most likely to respond to emails? If you're a programmer, do you understand exactly how each line of your code affects memory usage? If you're a student, do you know precisely which study methods work best for different types of information? Napoleon took this to an extreme that seemed almost comical at times. He once spent an entire evening calculating how many times a soldier would blink during a 1-hour march. Crazy? Maybe. But this same attention to detail let him move 200,000 men across Europe faster than any army in history had ever moved before. But here's the warning that comes with this principle. This level of detail obsession will make you seem strange to others. Napoleon's officers often complained that he would spend hours discussing seemingly trivial matters, like the exact angle of soldiers' hats, or the precise number of steps between army tents. They didn't understand that these Trivial details were building blocks of his larger success. The truth is, this kind of detailed knowledge gives you almost superhuman power in your field. When others are still gathering basic information, you can make split-second decisions because you've already mastered the small details they ignored. This is what Napoleon meant when he said, "In battle, the most important moment is one that comes before combat even begins." And this obsession with details leads us directly to Napoleon's second principle, something he called the 2 a.m. advantage. While his enemies slept, Napoleon would study maps by candlelight. He called it his 2 a.m. advantage, and it was perhaps his most powerful secret. Here's what's fascinating. Napoleon had a specific routine that sounds almost insane. He slept only 4 hours a night, from 8 p.m. to midnight. Then, in those quiet hours while the rest of the world slept, he would dive into his work. But it wasn't just about working late. Napoleon discovered something crucial about these early morning hours. In one of his letters to his brother Jerome, he wrote, "At 2 a.m., your mind is like a sharp blade. No distractions, no interruptions, just pure focus." He would use these hours to plan battles so detailed that his generals were often stunned by the precision of his orders. Let me share something most history books don't tell you. During the Egyptian campaign, Napoleon's soldiers noticed something strange. Every night, without fail, they would see a candle burning in his tent. One curious officer decided to keep track. For 30 straight nights, that candle burned until dawn. What was Napoleon doing? He was teaching himself Arabic, studying Islamic culture, and memorizing the terrain of every region he planned to conquer. This wasn't just random late-night work. Napoleon had a specific system. From midnight to 2 a.m., he would read reports and intelligence from the day. From 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., he would plan and strategize. From 4 a.m. to 6 a.m., he would write orders and responses. This wasn't just him being a workaholic. He had discovered that these specific hours gave him an edge his competitors couldn't match. Here's what's really interesting. Napoleon's doctors actually begged him to sleep more. They warned him about the health risks. His response? "Life is too short for sleep. We can sleep when we're dead." Was this extreme? Absolutely. But while his rivals were getting their comfortable 8 hours, Napoleon was gaining thousands of extra hours of focused work. Think about modern examples. Apple's Tim Cook starts his day at 3:45 a.m. Former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink wakes up at 4:30 a.m. But here's the key difference. Napoleon wasn't just waking up early to exercise or check emails. He used these hours for deep, focused work that required his complete mental attention. The science behind this is fascinating. Studies show that the brain is actually sharper in these early morning hours because there's more norepinephrine in your system, a chemical that helps with focus and memory. Napoleon didn't know the science, but he knew the results. He could think more clearly, plan more effectively, and solve problems that seemed impossible during daylight hours. But here's the warning about the 2 a.m. rule. It's not just about staying up late or waking up early. Napoleon had a saying, "Every hour of wasted time in youth is a chance of future misfortune." He wasn't just working more hours, he was working the right hours. During these quiet times, he wasn't just busy, he was strategically building his advantage. And this leads us to something even more important, why Napoleon chose these specific hours. He wrote in his diary, "When others sleep, I work. When others work, I think. When others think, I act." This wasn't just about being different, it was about creating a system where he was always one step ahead of everyone else. This dedication to the 2 a.m. advantage directly connects to Napoleon's next principle, what he called calculated boldness. Because while everyone thought Napoleon was just a daring risk-taker, Napoleon never just charged in. Every bold move was actually calculated down to the smallest detail. This is where most people completely misunderstand Napoleon. They see his amazing victories, crossing the Alps, conquering Egypt, marching on Moscow, and think, this guy was just incredibly brave and lucky. But here's the truth that most people miss. Napoleon was actually a math nerd, obsessed with calculating odds. Let me show you something fascinating. Before the Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon did something that seemed insane to his generals. He deliberately weakened his right flank, making it look like an easy target. His officers thought he'd lost his mind. But in his private notes found years later, Napoleon had filled 14 pages with calculations. He had calculated exactly how long it would take the enemy to notice the weak spot, how long they would take to plan their attack, and even how the morning fog would affect their decision-making. Here's what's crazy. In these notes, Napoleon wrote, "They will attack my right flank at approximately 9 a.m., thinking I have made a terrible mistake. By 9:45 a.m., they will realize their own terrible mistake." When the battle actually happened, the enemy attacked at 9 a.m., exactly as he had predicted. By 9:40 a.m., they were falling into his trap. This wasn't luck. This was mathematical precision disguised as boldness. But it gets even more interesting. Napoleon had a secret formula for taking risks. In his personal writings, he explained, "If the odds of success are less than 70%, I do not act. If they are above 70%, I act with everything I have." This wasn't just a rough guideline. He would actually break down every factor into mathematical probabilities. Weather conditions, 15% impact. Troop morale, 25% impact. Supply lines, 30% impact. He would spend hours calculating these numbers before making any bold move. Think about his famous crossing of the Alps. Everyone remembers the dramatic painting, Napoleon on his horse, pointing forward dramatically. But here's what really happened. Before that crossing, Napoleon spent 3 weeks interviewing every shepherd and mountain guide he could find. He calculated the exact weight each mule could carry at different altitudes. He tested different wheel designs for his cannons in various snow conditions. When he finally made his bold move, he had reduced the risk as much as humanly possible. This is crucial for you to understand. True boldness isn't about being reckless. Napoleon wrote something powerful about this. The line between bravery and stupidity is drawn with mathematics. When everyone thought he was being brave, he was actually being calculating. When they thought he was being reckless, he was actually being precise. Let me give you a modern example that perfectly matches Napoleon's approach. When Elon Musk started SpaceX, everyone thought he was being insanely bold. But just like Napoleon, Musk had spent months calculating every possible variable. He knew exactly how much each launch would cost, down to the smallest bolt. He had mapped out multiple paths to success and calculated the probability of each one. This brings us to Napoleon's most practical lesson about calculated boldness. In his war diary, he wrote, "People will call you lucky if you succeed through careful planning. Let them. The wise commander knows that luck is just probability taken personally." This wasn't just military advice. This was his formula for any major achievement in life. But here's the warning that comes with this principle. Calculated boldness requires incredible patience. Napoleon would sometimes spend weeks planning what looked like a spontaneous action. Most people can't handle this. They want to either play it completely safe or take wild, uncalculated risks. Napoleon's genius was in finding the perfect balance through pure mathematics. And this mathematical approach to boldness connects directly to Napoleon's next principle, something that surprised even his closest generals. Because while everyone focused on his strategic brilliance, Napoleon knew something most people miss. Technical skills get you in the room, but social skills make you ruler of the room. Here's what's fascinating. In Napoleon's personal notes, he kept detailed records of every officer's wife's name, their children's birthdays, and their personal interests. This wasn't just being friendly. This was strategic social mastery. Let me share something most people don't know about Napoleon. Every morning, he would spend 1 hour reviewing what he called his human maps, detailed notes about the people around him. He wrote, "Men are moved by 2 levers only, fear and self-interest." But here's where it gets interesting. Napoleon didn't use this knowledge to threaten people. Instead, he used it to make everyone feel important. Here's a perfect example. During one campaign, a young soldier was caught falling asleep on guard duty, normally a serious offense. But instead of punishing him, Napoleon asked about his family. The soldier mentioned his mother was sick. The next day, Napoleon had his personal physician visit the soldier's mother. That soldier later took a bullet for Napoleon at Waterloo. This wasn't just kindness. This was calculated social mastery. Napoleon had a specific technique for winning loyalty. He would deliberately make small mistakes in conversations about topics he actually mastered, allowing others to correct him. In his diary, he wrote, Let them feel superior in small things, and they will follow you in great things. This wasn't about being fake. It was about making others feel valued. But here's the most powerful part of Napoleon's social code. He understood that true influence comes from making others feel like heroes in their own story. During battles, he would often ask junior officers for their opinions before sharing his own. Even when he knew exactly what needed to be done, he would say things like, "What do you think about attacking from the east?" Then he would act as if their suggestion had inspired his final decision. Time for the conclusion, bringing it all together. Excellence isn't a goal, it's a code. Napoleon didn't just want to win battles, he wanted to master life itself. Think about everything we've covered. His obsession with details, his 2 a.m. advantage, his calculated boldness, and his social mastery. These weren't just random habits. They were parts of a precise system for becoming exceptional. Remember that 16-year-old boy who couldn't speak proper French? He didn't just become Emperor of France. He created a blueprint for excellence that still works today. In your life right now, you're facing your own battles. Maybe not with armies and cannons, but with challenges that feel just as overwhelming. Napoleon wrote something powerful in his final years. Impossible is a word only to be found in the dictionary of fools. But now you understand, this wasn't just a motivational quote. This was the conclusion of a man who had turned excellence into a science. A man who proved that with the right code, anyone can rise from nothing to achieve the exceptional. The question isn't whether Napoleon's code works. History has proven that it does. The question is, are you willing to follow it? Are you ready to obsess over details when others stay surface level? To work at 2 a.m. while others sleep? To calculate your bold moves while others gamble? To master the social game while others remain isolated? In Napoleon's own words, victory belongs to the most persevering. That's not just historic wisdom. That's your battle cry for excellence. The code is in your hands now. Use it.